I'll start. I'm Jessica Canizares. I'm a PhD student at Tufts University, and I'm also the Waterbird Program Manager for BirdsCaribbean. And today I'll be talking about one of our programs, the Caribbean Waterbird Census, which started in 2010. Whoops. Okay. So as you may know, the Caribbean has wonderful wetlands, and many birds rely on them. They support over 185 species of waterbird. This includes seabirds, marsh birds, shorebirds, herons, and egrets. 126 of these birds are neotropical migrants, and nearly a third of those are birds of conservation concern in the US or Canada. Many of these are shorebirds like the piping plover and the red knot. And of course, the Caribbean wetlands support Caribbean endemics. There's some obligate wetland users like the West Indian whistling duck, Zapata rail, if you're lucky enough to ever see one, and the red-shouldered blackbird. And of course, there's many other Caribbean endemics that are facultative wetland species. The region is well known for its important habitat. It shouldn't be a surprise to you that it's a hotspot for biodiversity if you've ever visited. There's 42 Ramsar sites, which are wetlands of international importance. Those are the blue dots. 294 important bird areas, which are the green shapes, and 2 lizard sites, which are sites that are specifically important to shorebirds. But despite these international designations, we're missing information about the wetlands and the species that use them. So in response to this, in 2010, BirdsCaribbean launched the Caribbean Waterbird Census. And not only does this collect data about bird status, distribution, and migration patterns, but it also collects data on the wetlands themselves. The Caribbean Waterbird Census, many of the monitors have received specific training just for this survey. There's 4 protocol types that increase in sophistication, ranging from a level 1 count, which is just a basic inventory of what's at a site, up to double observer, detection corrected analyses, distance sampling, that sort of thing. Counts can occur at any time throughout the year. We do have a regional count for 3 weeks in January and February to capture stationary overwintering birds. All of the data is stored in eBird-Caribbean. If you have this portal loaded on your phone and you're in a Caribbean wetland doing an eBird account, you can mark this protocol type. And BirdsCaribbean produced a 5-year report in 2014, and we are working on an updated 10-year report now. And these are available on our website. In the last 10 years of the Caribbean Waterbird Census, I wanted to share with you some overview stats. There's been over 10,000 eBird checklists, which are CWC counts. This is 135,000 bird observations. So one observation could be me seeing 20 pelicans or me seeing 500 semi-palmated sandpipers. And of those counts, it's almost 1.9 million birds, which is really remarkable. So thanks a lot to everyone that's been counting. There's been 384 people that have done CWC checklists in the Caribbean, and they've recorded 505 species, visiting lots of IBAs around the region, and over 1,700 unique sites have been visited. These are where those 1,700 sites are. Each dot represents a location where CWC checklists happen. The increasing size and change in color denotes how many checklists have occurred at those locations. So the larger blue ones are spots that there's been many hundreds of CWC counts. We would love if the black dots where there's just one count, if you live near there, it would be great to start capturing more data from those locations. In terms of island participation, each one of these bars represents a year, and its height denotes how many checklists were recorded in that year. The blue bars are the first 5 years, and the red bars are the last 5 years. So we can see that some places like Aruba, it's a lot of red bars, they've just started recording CWC data on Aruba. In some places like St. Eustatius or Statia, they haven't participated as much as they did in the first 10 years. So these data are important because it allows us to see who's participating, where we need to fill knowledge gaps, and perhaps do more CWC trainings. And now I'd like to focus on 2 areas and tell a little CWC story for each. The first one is the Cargill Salt Ponds in Bonaire. On the left is an image of Bonaire, and Cargill Salt Ponds makes up a majority of the island. You can see all the salt ponds zoomed in on the right here. And while Lisa, our executive director, was visiting Bonaire, she was actually doing a wetlands training workshop. One of the managers at Cargill said, "Hey, why don't you come check out my salt ponds? I have a lot of birds there. I think you'd be interested." And it was totally clear that this was a site that hosted large numbers of shorebirds. So they began CWC monitoring in 2015. And this work was not just done by BirdsCaribbean, it was done in partnership with Environment Canada, the Cargill managers, and local organizations like Stand Up Bonaire, Wild Conscience, and the Dutch Nature Alliance. In 2018, the site was designated a Western Hemisphere Shorebird Reserve Network site of regional importance. This is only the second site in the Caribbean. The first site is Cabo Rojo in Puerto Rico, and it was designated based on the following criteria. There's more than 20,000 shorebirds annually that use the site. They counted almost 32,000 birds of 15 species, and they cross the geographic population threshold for 3 species, the short-billed dowitcher, the rufa red knot, and snowy plover. So what's happening now at Cargill? Well, we're continuing to do CWC surveys and funding work there, in addition to habitat covariates like salinity and water depth to figure out the prime locations for shorebirds and invertebrate sampling. You can see one of our survey maps in the lower right by Fernando Semal, who does most of our work there. And each one of the dots is a survey location that he visits. It's quite a lot, and it's an inhospitable environment. He does a great job. We're happy to report also that Cargill is funding bird observation towers. This is incredible news for us. It will raise the profile of the site, provide ecotourism options for tourists and local guides. BirdsCaribbean ran a Caribbean birding trail training there. So that will surely help the local ecotourist guides. And of course, it will create an educational outdoor space for school children and the public. The next site I'd like to talk about is Monte Cristi in the Dominican Republic. It's quite a different site from Cargill, a different story. It's located right on the northern coast of the DR, next to the border, east of the border with Haiti. And I've zoomed in on it here. It's a sprawling wetland complex. And what we found there with our local partner, Grupo Acción Ecológica, is that this site is very important, not just to shorebirds, but to other water birds, waterfowl, seabirds, ducks. CWC surveys began in 2011, and you can see on the pictures on the right, conditions of sites is variable across Monte Cristi wetlands. Some have a lot of human influence, like the one on the bottom, but that doesn't stop the white-cheeked pintails and all the shorebirds in that photo, and some are relatively undisturbed. And the data I'm going to show you next is just one survey that our team did in 2013 in November. So they were there for 3 days, and they worked their way across the wetland complex, and they were counting unique sites as they went. Of course, these are just raw counts, they're not detection corrected, and of course, birds could move between sites. They worked their way across the wetlands, counting birds. And what they found, I've made 2 tables here. One is for waterfowl. There was over 6,000 ducks that they found, and over 17,000 shorebirds. And this is really amazing considering that this site, while it is a national park, it doesn't have other designations. It's not an IBA, it's not a wizard site, but it clearly could qualify. For an IBA, congregations of 20,000 waterbirds regularly qualify for an IBA. And this is just shorebirds and waterfowl, which is 23,000 birds. This doesn't include seabirds or herons and egrets. So it's a very, very important site. And something else our monitors do while they're there, which is disturbing news, is that they find a lot of illegal waterbird traps. So all of these photos are Grupo Acción Ecológica removing traps. And these traps they're placed at low tide, like the picture on the left, and they're sort of simple loop fishing line snare traps. And when the tide comes in, on the picture on the right, they're covered. And when the waterbirds are walking around foraging, their feet get caught. And here's some pictures. There's a live flamingo being released from a trap. You can see how it's grabbed its foot. And unfortunately, there's a dead heron or egret that they found. And in 2019, the team removed over 300 traps, and this February they removed over 650 traps. Of course, they always report these to the relevant authorities. The traps always reappear. So this area is a place that deserves conservation attention. I would also like to point out that this site is an under-eBirded site. It's a remote area. People that eBird aren't there. And the majority of the data that comes from this site is directly from BirdsCaribbean funding CWC counts for this team to go out and count birds here. This is where the majority of this information is coming from, is the CWC. I'd also like to quickly talk about some of our trainings and ongoing projects, which are very exciting. In 2019, we hosted a workshop in Cabo Rojo, Puerto Rico. We had 33 participants from 14 islands for 5 days. It was incredible. It was shorebird focused. We trained them in shorebird identification, CWC monitoring techniques, and all participants were invited to apply for a small grant. So we awarded about a dozen grants, and they're ongoing across the islands. People are doing their CWC monitoring and shorebird conservation activities. We also have many collaborations with Canadian Wildlife Service and US Fish and Wildlife Service. This includes piping plover surveys. If you know the history of these birds, in the last decade, the Caribbean has emerged as an important wintering site. First the Bahamas, and now we're recognizing that Turks and Caicos Islands also are an important wintering site for this species. We're also collaborating with these agencies for shorebird surveys in Barbados, but our collaborations don't end there. So in summary, I would just like to reiterate that the Caribbean Waterbird Census is so valuable. We're learning information about birds, where they are, when they're there. We're identifying areas that have potential for special designation. Cargill was already designated. There's certainly many other sites in the Caribbean that may qualify. And we're also identifying priority areas for migratory shorebirds and waterbirds, many of which are of conservation concern. And we're also engaging people across the region to take part in the CWC and capacity building. So with that, I would love to take any questions about the CWC or waterbirds in the Caribbean.
Thanks, Jessica, for such a wonderful presentation. Let's see if there are questions in the Q&A. There is one. For Jessica, can you talk about the community engagement done to help decrease illegal trapping? Has it become more of a sensitive issue to be seen as prioritizing birds over people, given the economic impacts of COVID-19?
Okay. Hi, Irene. Thanks for your question. To be honest, I don't know if there's been on-the-ground work in Monte Cristi specifically with trappers. I do know that Grupo Acción Ecológica does report the traps to the local authorities. They also do a really expanded community outreach with school children, bringing them to wetlands, bringing them on field trips. And this has proved really important. And these are the people that use the wetlands in rural areas, and they're the ones that throw rocks at birds and might trap birds as adults. And so this sort of early intervention education to inspire young conservationists is one of the tools that Grupo Acción Ecológica uses. I don't know of interacting with actual trappers itself. I can check on that, but I don't have information on that. Lisa, do you?
Okay. Thanks, Jessica.
Yeah, sorry, no, I don't, but we can ask Maria and follow up on that.
If you can answer very quickly, how do you define wetlands for the CWC?
Good question. So wetlands for the CWC are pretty broad. They could include freshwater areas, lagoons, mud flats, beaches. Sometimes it depends on your authority, and there's many different designations for what's wetland and what's not, but we also include areas of the ocean as wetlands too. Anywhere that is permanently or ephemerally has water.
Okay.
Yes, I will add to that we follow the Ramsar definition, which includes marine areas as well, and beaches.
Okay. Well, thanks a lot to Jessica and the co-authors of this presentation.